And here we come.
Hello everybody, I'm Jenny.
And I'm Paul.
And we are with the GoBox Art Crate, and we are coming to you tonight to stream our first fall painting of 2021. As we know, fall is right around the corner, and that's the most inspirational time of year for me for painting. But we're also celebrating 2 years of GoBox.
2 years of GoBox.
Yeah, exactly. Our very first video was early September of 2019, and we're happy to be here 2 years later doing the same thing, bringing you the same stuff. So
that means if we do 2 paintings every month, we've been doing 2 for 24 months. That means we've done 48 live streams.
That's a lot.
And then we mix some other videos in as well.
We have quite a few videos on our channel, so if you kids videos and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So if you want to check out anything new, we sell kits for each of those. We have a lot of fun Halloween ones that are not part of the subscription box. But let's do a quick toast, and then we'll zoom into our stuff.
Let's
2
do
years,
it.
yay!
2 years, wow.
All right, let's zoom in and have a look at our project.
All right, we'll see you in a bit.
So here is what I'm going to teach you today. This is called Autumn Sunrise, and I just named it that because that's what it looks like to me.
Right.
Coming up with the names is sometimes kind of hard, but we manage.
You had to work with my color palette this month.
Yeah, so Paul picked the colors. It's just a variation of the primary colors, slightly different red than normal, different yellow, different blue than I would normally put on a primary color palette. And then, so in your Go Box this month, your sticker was Bob Ross, which timed up really well with the Bob Ross documentary that just landed on Netflix. That was a happy little accident. I had no idea that was going to drop, and then when I chose this artist for the sticker, there are no mistakes, only happy little accidents. That is probably my all-time favorite quote by Bob Ross, and very recognizable and very true.
I see that Daniel is joined us again.
Hey, thanks.
So you know what I think we should do, speaking of Bob Ross real quick, I know we want to get into the painting, but I think that we need to watch, I've already watched the documentary. I think you need to watch it, and then we should do a reaction video.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your kit, if you get the subscription box, that's what we do. We send a monthly subscription box with 2 unique projects every month. This is Project 1. Project 2 will be airing next week. That's this one right here. So that's Paul's Red Sunset, I believe we called that.
Yeah, this here painting.
Yeah. And so your kit comes with step-by-step instructions, which are great to have for the visual so that you know how your painting should look somewhat at each point. Mm-hmm. And I'll follow along with those. I may put a couple things out of order here and there just because of dry times and whatnot. I'm going to set this aside where I can access it easily. And with your Go Box kit, your first box comes with the brushes. Now, anyways, we found these great kits that we love with all the varying sizes. You'll want a paper towel or an old paint rag, a old cup of water. I just use this old Van Gogh mug. And let's go ahead and take our largest brush to start. Dip it in your water cup, brush it back and forth, just wake those bristles up.
I'm going to go adjust our air conditioning.
Okay, feel too warm for you?
I am raising the humidity level of the room.
Yeah, you are. So I'm going to dry the brush off on both sides. And I try to get the water, if you're painting flat like me without an easel, I try to get any rogue drops of water off this metal ferrule because they will roll down and splat on your canvas just when you don't want them to. So first what I want to do, I want to loosely mix white and yellow. So usually I'll just scrape off some yellow, plop it in between, and white, same thing. And I dab them together like this, so I'm just kind of bopping my brush up and down. And so the color you get is more of a marbled mix. So you'll see streaks of white and yellow. And I sort of dab in where I think the sun should go. So see, I'm just sort of tapping my brush around in a very uneven circle.
Give it a little tippy tap.
And then I'm going to keep going around with these taps of this yellow till I get a good chunk of this on the canvas. So this is the white and yellow mix, loose mix, so you will get occasional streaks of yellow right in there, and it will look very vibrant. It doesn't really matter what direction your brush strokes go. Sometimes I'll do sort of an X pattern like this. Sometimes I'll just flip it back and forth. I do utilize this nice wide side of the brush rather than poking up and down. And now I'm going to start bringing some white into here just to lighten and soften the sky and also soften the sun area. So if you have a lot of paint on your brush, you can either wipe it off on your canvas. That's always a nice way to utilize it and clean your brush off. I'm going to dip it right in the white paint. Let me scoot this over so it's on camera. Technical difficulties. There we go. So I'll dip my brush right in the white. And I'm going to bring in around the sun, and I'll slowly start to make more of a circle, although this should look like one of those skies where everything sort of looks like a watercolor painting. In the fall, you see that a lot, where there's maybe some mist, and you can see the sun, it's through the clouds, but you can't really see a perfectly circular shape, which is nice for painting. Then we don't have to worry about making a perfectly circular shape. But I'm just going to do circle-ish. I think I called it a lazy, hazy round shape. That works. On the instructions, that's what I call it, lazy, hazy round shape. Now I'm going to take white and I'm going to add it throughout the sky. So this is going to soften and lighten your sky and also extend your color out a bit. So you want to keep the concentrated white in here, knowing that you could go back and add more if your background ends up being too light and your sun just sort of disappears. It's easy fix.
Now, you may have already said this, but how far down on the canvas are we?
Oh yeah, we're going to go about halfway.
All right.
These sort of brush strokes with the deep patches of color can give the illusion of clouds in the sky, which I think is a really nice, almost like a cheat.
Oh, it's not a cheat?
Well, it's not painting clouds.
No.
It's sort of...
But sometimes, like, painting clouds is
suggesting clouds.
Is less about painting clouds and more about suggesting, absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes you can overthink things and think the clouds are puffy and it can make your brain get a little anxious. But we're going to just keep this background really simple and loose. There are elements in this background that are important, but they are not the star of the show. The star of the show in this painting are going to be those two trees in the foreground. So I don't want you to have any kind of anxiety about anything that we do in the background, because it's really loose and easy.
So are we just basically shooting for coverage?
Yeah.
So we just want to make sure we're getting all of the canvas, the upper part, covered with paint.
Yep, and you can go back, if this has become too much of all one color, you can go back with just like, I'll just take plain yellow on my brush and dab that in and maybe put some patches on here that are just that pure yellow. And it will mix with the other colors because they're still wet. But you can play around with your sky and make it unique and make it yours. Another thing you could add in your sky, if you really want to take a step out of the box, you could add a little small amount of that red in the sky too, and it'd give you sort of this is a really orangey red compared to what we've used in the past. So it doesn't really make a pink, it makes kind of a coral color. So if needed, if you need to refresh your sun, you could wash your brush and dry it off and do it with a clean brush. Not 100% necessary, but I went ahead and did that. And just refresh that lazy hazy circle there. I try not to be too meticulous with this. So you can see I'm sort of quickly just dabbing my brush around. Before this dries, it might feel a little quick through the background, and that's because we are fighting with drying. In fact, I'm going to get some wet paint down here. If it's really dry through here, I want you to add some wet paint. So the background's going to feel a little bit quick at first. But it's loose and easy, so that works. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix a little bit of blue into this, and you should get a pale sage green color. And if it's not green enough, put some more yellow back in there. It's going to mix with the wet paint on your canvas, I never make enough, so I'm going to actually go do something I don't normally do. I'm going to make more than usual.
So just a heads up, guys. I tried a little bit of the red in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
A very tiny
Very
bit
small
goes
amount.
a long way. So
you want this to be really pale. It's kind of almost like a sea green. I know the ocean in Oregon in the winter looks a lot like this color. And what I'm going to have us do is we're going to tap in some really loose and easy foliage. So these are background trees and tall shrubs and blackberry bushes and all that wild
it's where all the wild critters
overgrowth
live.
grows. And I'm just going to kind of scoop around my sun. You can end up going on top of your sun later if you want to do a more defined tree. That would be fine. I'm just going to come across here in a strip about maybe 2 inches in height. One of the things I like to do here is vary the height of these. So if you've got like where it looks like a skateboard ramp, you want to change that up a bit by maybe going a little taller in one area. That's going to make it look a bit more natural. And you can see I kind of flip my brush back and forth so that I'm not always just using the same side of the brush. So sometimes I'm using the corner of the brush. That'll give you smaller little dabs of foliage. Sometimes I flip it around to the other side because that means my hand is holding it at a slightly different angle. So I'm just creating a variance here. And I apologize if the background feels fast, but I want you to work fast through here because I don't want you to overthink anything.
You know, we did have a question on one of our videos recently about how do we keep the paint from drying so fast?
A spritzer bottle.
Well, the other answer is move faster. I mean, that sounds like a little bit of a cop-out of an answer, but we really don't do anything special to keep the paint from drying fast other than just moving quickly.
You can keep a spritzer bottle nearby, like an atomizer. Did I say that right? Atomizer, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way to go. A regular spray bottle tends to do too big of droplets.
Yeah, and art stores will sell atomizers. In fact, I would check a Blick Art Supply for that. And they're all across the United States.
And online.
And online is where I order. Okay, so I want to make this a deeper green. I'll show you on the photo. So what we've got right now is kind of in this range. We're going to deepen and darken and bring this color down. So it's going to create a darker part of the wood. So it's light on the top. We keep that light area we just did, and then bring it down to a deeper color through here. Before I do anything, though, I want to mark off my river. And it's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches from the bottom of the canvas. I flip my brush so I'm using the skinny edge. And I'm just going to go straight-ish across. Everything gets covered up, so don't stress about this first line that you do. And now I'm going to deepen the color here in the lower part of the dense dark forest. So I'm going to bring in more blue and more yellow. So you're basically getting close to a teal color, actually. You can play around with it. It can be more blue or more on the yellow side. And I'm going to bring this in, doing the same thing I did up in here, where you're kind of keeping the shapes very varied and random. Let the wet paint mix with the other wet paint. We're going to bring it down to this line. A lot of times what I'll do is get this on here really fast. And before it dries, I would go back with my brush that's out of paint and kind of touch up the top edges.
So is this like a secondary layer of forest here?
It's actually just supposed to be, yeah, it could be. That's probably what I intended when I painted it, but it's, what I really wanted was the forest to just look deeper and darker through here, but not spooky.
Gotcha.
Speaking of spooky, we got to show we'll show our October paintings. I always do something that's in the Halloween realm because it's one of my favorite holidays. I know lots of you guys love Halloween. And so, yeah, I've got this fun one coming up that is not, it's not really a spooky painting. It's just kind of got the Halloween feel to it. The little Edgar Allan Poe mixed in. And Paul, what did you do? You did mushrooms.
Some mushrooms.
Yeah, he took a big step outside of his comfort zone. And
Yeah,
painted.
well, I mean, It is still kind of a landscape, but not
really.
not a grand vista type of landscape.
Out of your wheelhouse, man.
I don't know. It felt like it was in my wheelhouse when I actually did it.
All right, well, that's good.
We'll show you guys in just a minute.
Yeah. So what I was talking about is you can soften up the top edge or change the shape of it if needed. You could use this same big brush, might as well. Just clean it on off. Dry it off. Make sure you don't have any rogue droplets. And then I'll just soften using the dried off brush. Just soften this top edge if it hasn't dried completely. So I like it to sort of blend into the lighter minty sage color. But it doesn't have to. It could be a complete second layer of forest and shrubs. You can kind of twirl your brush around if you want. And if you need to go back and touch up these, we're going to do that later. So we will get a chance to do that. Don't really need to add more paint on here unless you want to. There's a couple spots where I've got it kind of thin. You can see a few little white speckles of canvas.
Our friend Daniel says, even if we stopped right now, that's a really cool painting.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, some of the paintings go through a really rough phase. This one is... It's one that it kind of stays pretty good throughout the whole thing. So we want to paint on the water right now. And yeah, you're right. Now that I see it on the monitor, it is really pretty like this. Now that I want to get to where I'm painting the water on, now that I've got the top 3/4 of the canvas painted in. Water is clear and it's going to reflect what colors are around it. So what I'm going to do is I like to go with a paler color in the water always. And I'm going to mix some white in, so I get this light sage, or somewhere in that realm. It doesn't have to be exact. And I might throw a little more yellow back in there. And my brush strokes are going to be just straight back and forth, because water sits flat, and by moving your brush that way, you're going to indicate that. At the edge of the water, I'll turn my brush and use the skinny edge here. And you can occasionally put some yellow in there. I just dip my brush right in the pure yellow, knowing that it's going to mix with that wet paint that's on here. In theory, if it doesn't dry too fast, we again are fighting AC, which tends to zap the air of moisture. I'm looking forward to some of the cooler months coming up.
Tell me about it.
So yeah, I'm just cleaning up the edge here. And then under the sun, I like to put a highlight of white in the water. And if you've already painted over that area, it's not a problem. I think when I very first painted this, I did that. I went back and added the white in. This along here, your edge, it doesn't have to be like crisp and sharp. In fact, if you make it sort of hazy, it can look like there's that light autumn fog, which we all love, or at least most of us, I think, sitting on the top of the water. It's kind of a cool effect. And I've got a nice white spot ready for the sun reflection, but again, if you've painted over that area, not a biggie. You'll want to wipe your brush off if you have a lot of paint on it. I have hardly any, so I'm not going to have to worry about that too much. I'm going to take and I'm just going to brush white in there and go back and forth. Let it blend at the edges with these other colors. If you end up with it too white, come back in with some of your sage green and touch that up. One of the things I like to do too is turn my brush and use the skinny edge and just cut right through that white. And then what happens is you get these thin lines that spread out, and it can give the illusion of current in the water. It makes your water look nice and glassy. Just gives it more of the appearance of water.
As far as ideal room temperature for paint,
Not this.
No, I'd say, you know, typical house temperature 67 to 71.
Yeah, that's about right.
I don't know that it hurts it to be cooler than that.
Our space here is kind of big and old, so it takes quite a long time to get the temperature down. Although we don't ever let our thermostat go below 75 here. Or I think our landlord told us that. Like, okay. Okay, so yes, it totally looks like water with some kind of tree base over it. I do notice I have a little bit of a bulge here, which I'll want to tidy up because it just doesn't look quite right. So I'll just use the thin edge of my brush and some lighter color. I just used pure white here. These are the things I notice when I look up and see the painting on the monitor, because right in front of me the perspective is a little bit jacked. But looking at it on the monitor, I'll notice these funky little bulges. What is living under the water here? So I've kind of lost my fogginess that I really liked.
No, we can always bring that back, though.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to try and do it now by cleaning and drying my brush and just going back and forth over the edge of this. So I straightened the edge up, but now I can hopefully haze it up. Maybe I'll add a little more paint.
All right, I don't want to work this too much.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting into that part where some of my paint's peeling off.
Mm-hmm. I've got that a little bit.
So if you're new to this acrylic painting, that's one of the things I want to talk about. Overworking an area. When you've got wet paint on your canvas and you try to add more, it tends to leave these spots that are bare. And I can bring my canvas up a little bit. You can kind of see I'm talking about that right there. It's more noticeable in person. But so what I want to do then is just let it dry and forget about it for a little bit and work on something else. That's what we're going to do. Let's clean our brush off. Take a sip, clean the brush off, dry it off. That was a very quick background, but hopefully everybody will get it done. And if not, you can pause us. Even if you're painting live tonight, you can pause us, no problem. Just get right back to it when you're ready. So let's, we're gonna make a coral color. We're making this color right here. So that is a mixture of red, yellow, and white. It's pretty pale. We want it to be with, you know, this sagey green is kind of a pastel color. That's what we want. The coral version of that. So I'll take my big brush, scrape off a little yellow, use the corner of my brush, scrape off a little red. First mix those together. That makes such a cool color. I love that. Just dyed my daughter's hair that color, actually. It's the exact color. Let's add a little white in there. She wanted to go a little punk, I guess, so we did it, and it was fun.
She wanted to go a little punk. She's been punk.
Yeah, true. Okay, so that's what happens when you're a child of artists, I guess. So I have this color on my brush. When I tap in this very loose, very easy tree that 90% gets covered up, I'm going to use the corner of the brush because then you can control the leaf size. So here's what I'm doing. I want this to show just kind of at the top. It can overlap the green or it can come down below the green. It doesn't matter. Mine's going to be slightly different than my original because it's a different day. Different day, different... I don't know. It's hard to get it exactly replicated.
Well, it's because we paint fairly loose.
Yeah. So I'm bringing this all the way down to, let's see, how far to go? Right about to here. You can bring it down to the bank if you want, but I was sort of thinking that this is in the background. We don't even paint a trunk on this unless you want to. If you feel like you need to later, we can definitely do that. But we're just wanting a billowy...
little pop of color.
Pillowy pop of color. And I've got green speckles showing through it, which I love. I want to keep that. If yours is more opaque, that's not going to be a problem either. Because like I said, here, let's look at it again. So much of it gets covered up. It's just this top peeking out. But I want to switch down to a different brush size because we do have a couple others along the river. There's one back here, it's a peekaboo tree, you barely see it, and then there's one right here, just to the left of center. Wash that brush off, dry it off. This one's gonna set aside for a little bit. And I will pick up this number 8. I almost said number 4. Number 8 flat brush from your kit. Go ahead and dip it in the water. Wake those bristles up.
Mm-hmm.
What?
None.
And before this coral dries on my palette, I want to use it up. So I'm going to find the center and just go maybe to the left, half an inch or an inch. And let's tap out a very small version of that. Just a round, puffy shape. Just by lifting and tapping your brush. We add some brighter red to this later. So that it actually has some more vivid red to it. And leave some green holes of foliage poking through because that's what you would have in nature usually. Sometimes you'll have a big solid tree, but I like to indicate that you can see through some parts of it. We do paint a tree trunk on this one later. And then what little tiny bit of my paint is remaining, I'm going to paint in another shrub shape over here. This one I thought of as being more of an actual shrub and not so much a tree.
I hope you guys like this red color because we're going to be using it a lot next week.
Are we?
Yeah, the whole painting.
Oh yeah, you're painting. I need to make some more. I thought I was going to be good, but then I remembered we have to reflect some of this in the water. So I'll make some more of that color, or close to it. Let's see, that's pretty close. There we go. Now let's just kind of wipe the brush off on your towel so you have a little bit of paint on it, and I'm going to go under this guy, back and forth, just brushing back and forth, just a blush into the water. You can add a bit more paint if your brush runs out. Just do a little at a time. So I'm really using this like a dry brush, meaning very little paint. And I just kind of create a kind of round shape because this is round. But my brush strokes, instead of dabbing in a round shape, they're just going to go back and forth, which again helps give the impression that this is water. And we want to do this one too, just a blush of color. Could have left these out, but it really does look good to have this color reflected down in here where we've got all this green and sage and yellow. And let's get a little on under this one. Your brush should make kind of a scraping noise because we don't want to use a lot of paint. And that's good. I'm not going to do any more than that. What next? Okay, this is where I took on the original, and you don't really see it, but I did add a few more defined, you see it over here, I guess, a little bit more defined green, sage green trees, 100% optional, but I'm using this smaller brush that we were just using, your number 8 flat. And we'll mix blue, yellow, make your teal color first. It's not really teal.
No, it's not.
Kind of a mossy green. And then I'll add white to that.
Where are you doing this?
So I'm just going to define some of the edges of these shrubs back here. Mm. So I try to make it very similar to that color. It can be a little darker. And every time I mix paint, I end up with a giant glob on my brush, and I don't want that for what I'm gonna do, so I'm gonna just scrape it on my palette, or your paper towel, either way. If you scrape it on your palette, then you can feed your brush from it and conserve a little paint. So I'm gonna take this one and just do what I did here. You make a little bit more defined looking tree. You can do it by dabbing little dabs, which are easy, or you can do Foliage that's kind of more scooped. So you have a combination. And I'm just gonna let my brush run out. Now if your color here is a lot darker than what you have going on here, or a lot different color, just pull it down and let your brush run out of paint so it just sort of fades into that background. Yeah, maybe I'll do another here. You could even make what looks kind of like a fir tree if you want, just by doing your foliage a little more horizontal. I could do that over here. I tapped into a little darker color that I had on my palette. And now I've got what kind of resembles a fir tree that's probably going to be covered by my lower foreground left red tree. But it's fun to practice. I highly recommend practicing in areas you know you're going to cover up. Right, wash that brush. Take a sip. Relax, take a deep breath. We did a lot of fast stuff. Wiggle your fingers. Sometimes get a little stiff fingered doing this. So I'm gonna wash and dry the brush. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna have us create this landform that's hiding back here on the other side of the river. And it's a little bit lighter shade of this, and I'll show you how. So we've got the coral color already on your palette, or like me, it may have dried. So I'll make a little bit more. That was red, yellow, red, and white. So make an orange at first. Scrape off a little white. And then we're just gonna mess this all up by putting a small amount of black in it. Start with a small amount because the black will really overpower. What we're aiming for is kind of a brownish gray. So we want it to be not as dark as black, and the white in this color is going to keep it from getting that way. So just gradually add more black until you get this color. I'm trying to think what I would compare this to. What would you call that, Paul? It's almost bronzy.
Yeah. That sounds good.
So again, I've got a big glob of paint on my brush from mixing the colors, so I'll just scrape it off on my palette. Flip your brush around, scrape both sides. And then sometimes you might have to redip the tip of the bristles in. This little landform is really easy. It comes to just to the right of the center. And sometimes it's easier to just paint along the water's edge and draw the straight line and figure out, okay, I want it to go to right there. And then you can come in and I just do little low rolling hills, like this is a bank. And then as it gets out here, you want it to come down to just a little point. And then you've got this little patch of land to fill in, which is exactly what we're gonna do next. I think this ended up being a little bit pinker than what's on my original, but not a whole lot. Probably had more red in my color and less black. So by making this lighter than the foreground landforms that are here, it's going to help give this some perspective. It's a nice thing to practice if you're painting, to make background objects really pale and washed out, and then the foreground objects really dark. And then you get this nice high contrast and perspective. Okay, so there I have my landform. Because we reflected all of these trees in the water, the light source is behind everything. It's going to kind of cast reflections in the water. I want to reflect this into the water really loosely. I'll show you on the original. It's so hazy you can barely see it. What I do for that is I take and I'm going to wash all my paint off my brush. It doesn't have to be 100%. I'm going to put a little dab of water on my palette. It's a little bead of water there. Dry my brush off. Now I will mix this color into that water so you get a really watered down wash. Now you want to be careful if you're painting on an easel, because the second you put this on, you're going to get like these dark tears dripping down from this. And so what I do, this is really watery, so see if I brush through it, it starts separating. Dip your brush in it, dab your brush on the towel on both sides, And then go back and forth under that landform. And sometimes you can pull fresh paint from the land down into the water, and that helps shade it even more. I feel like I need a little more paint in there. But you get a nice soft shadow, so it's not like a super hard line shadow. It goes with, the softness will go with everything we got going on back here. Everything is soft in the background. So it's almost like the bottom edge of this disappears. Just sort of disappears into the fog. And I'm gonna reverse a step here, or just go out of order, because I've got, everything's drying really fast on my palette. Wash your brush off and set it aside. And I have tree trunks over here, very vague, small, they're the tiniest little hair-like tree trunks. There, I'll tilt this around, you can kind of see it. I did paint one back here, but it's totally covered. But I do these out of that color, so I want to do them now before this dries. So take your tiniest brush, you can dip it in the water, and what I like to do is I like to pinch the bristles so you get a nice pointy tip. And go ahead and dip it right in the paint. You don't need to use the watered down paint unless that feels easier to you. And I'm gonna go under this tree with this skinny little line, and it can be broken up. So use very light pressure so you can, occasionally have the line break. And what that does is it makes it look like foliage kind of comes in front of your tree trunk. And then I will do branches that go up and out, just right into the foliage. And you can branch off of those. You can even make branches that just appear out of nowhere up here, because that's what would happen. You got leaves in the way. And it's super loose, easy, and quick. There. When we add a little bit darker coral foliage on this tree, it ends up looking better. I do want to do this one, and then we'll reflect a little in the water. So again, this gets covered up, but it's good practice. And practice makes perfect.
Perfect practice makes you know.
I learn mostly from mistakes, actually. That's kind of how, probably as most people learn that way.
There's actually, in the Bob Ross documentary, there's some discussion about that.
Yeah. I learn from happy accidents. Sometimes learning from mistakes is costly, but with painting, you can cover it all up. Other things, not so much. So I want to reflect this into the water. You might use this...
It depends on how good of attorneys you have.
Yeah. You might use this watered down version that we made and just go straight down under that tree trunk. I have too much paint on. I'm just going to feed off of this tree trunk I did. And just add the suggestion of a few branches reflected in there. You can do this one too, even though it's going to get covered. If you want to add a tree trunk to this, we could. I think doing it later would be good, because then we kind of know where to start. Because we're going to have a big old puffy tree right here. I could add a tree trunk to this. If you have a fir tree, it would be kind of cool to just suggest a little tree trunk running through there. I skipped some spots, so I'll have some spots that are just foliage. I've got one right here I could do. I'm just making a completely different painting.
Oh, you're
what
straying away from the instructions, Jenny. Be careful, rein it in.
Okay. Now, what are we mixing here?
Margaritas, I hope.
Mixing margaritas. So I have us adding more black to this kind of bronzy color, which mine is almost dry. I'm going to add some more in there and see what I got. So if yours is dry, just mix some more red and yellow into it. Maybe a tiny, you probably don't need to mix any white into it. What you should get by adding the red and yellow into it, you should get a brownish shade. Make sure you add yellow, because otherwise you end up with kind of a burgundy color. which we do use later. So there, dark brown. I ended up with like truly what I would call bitter chocolate. Maybe on camera it looks black. It's actually dark brown. And I'm going to draw these. So I have this one that goes out to about the middle, and this one very small amount, just enough to plant a tree on. And this comes up, it's about an inch or so almost to the water line. It can go above the water line, it can go right. I try not to do it right at the water line. Sometimes that looks a little too planned out. So I'm going to drop below the edge of the water here and just sketch down, down, down. Let that go down to about the center, or I went to a little left to center, that's fine. Fill that in. I'm using pretty solid paint here because this is in the foreground, so we do want that high contrast. Everything back here was very soft. Now, and you can, if you start really loving your paintings, which I hope happens, you can buy frames for these. I'm sure that Michael's, if you're in the United States, Michael's craft stores. They bought out Aaron Brothers framing, and they have frames for just about every size of everything. Look how it disappears into the table.
And we have, like, I mean, these are pretty common sizes, so this should be the kind of a size you should be able to just walk into a Michael's store and buy a frame for.
Yep, yeah, right off the shelf.
Both this and then the 11 by 14 set.
I noticed too, Michael's sells giant packs of frames for about $80, I want to say $89. It's like a big set of frames. You can frame a whole season's worth of paintings. Okay, so now this one is not going to go up as high as this one did, maybe about half the height. And I'm going to just come down to about here, so I have a gap between these. Just, like I said, enough to plant a tree on. So it took me about, I want to say, 3 or 4 paintings, maybe 3 paint. And I know I didn't do 4. I think I did 3 paintings until I was satisfied with one to put out for Go Box. I love fall so much that I really wanted something I really liked, and the other ones I only kind of liked. There might have been 1 or 2 I just flat out didn't like. Happens often. So washing my brush off. And I'll dry it off. Now we're going to paint these wild and crazy tree trunks. So I really wanted a curly maple tree, and I think they are so cool how they twist and bend, and I love that they sort of bend towards each other. They don't have to, though. You can plan yours out a little bit different. In fact, let's show the original one I did that's on the floor there. This was, I guess, my rough draft. So I had normal trees. Like, there's no crazy bend, and when I got this all ready to this point, I thought, you know what, I'm going to make these trees different. So let's take brush-wise, you know, I'm going to use my second smallest, so that's the number 4 flat. That's probably a good one to use. You could use your number 8 if you wanted to, but this one will give you a little bit more control. I'm going to add a drop of water to my paint here because it's gasping for hydration. And by adding some water, you can make it more fluid for drawing. And don't be nervous here. I know it's hard because we've got all this pretty stuff and we're painting something really dark and detailed on top of it. But what I do for this is I'm going to come out like this and then a sharp bend like that. That's all you have to do right now. So pretend you're drawing like a king cobra that's just popping out of the ground and ready to strike. And it's easy, since you've mastered that, maybe, it's easy to just do the other one opposite. So another little king cobra that's shorter like that. Like maybe I just kind of drew a C shape, I guess. And then trees are always thicker where they grow out of the ground. So all the roots are under the ground, and then you've got, I'm gonna just hop over here about maybe half an inch or so and parallel that line. But as I'm going up, I'm getting closer to my original line. Till finally they join into one. And then I have something to fill in. I know it looks really weird right now. But I feel like for this sort of tree, this is probably the better way to at least start it. The trunk is the part that was going to require a little extra thought. This little bendy trunk. Okay, let's do this one too. So just going to parallel that. I hop over about 1/4 of an inch, but this is a smaller tree. If you make yours a little bigger, that's totally fine. You saw my other painting, they can all be different. Okay, what have we got here? Double horns, that's what it looks like. All right, I'm gonna use the thin edge of this brush, and I'm going to come out and see how I'm sort of making wavy lines, or a wavy line. It's because this is a curly maple tree. So like a bonsai tree, I guess. This one, same thing. We're gonna go up and out, growing towards that light source. And I'm gonna add a little more water to my paint here as it's drying up. So then what I wanna do is I wanna split off. This is gonna start growing this way. Maybe off the canvas. In just a minute, we're going to switch to our smallest brush. But I want to get these main branches done. So this one too, it's going to go right across that background tree and split off. And these are going to be the thicker main branches.
I'm getting carried away.
Someone says there's a screaming face in the paint.
That was a while ago. I couldn't see it, so I didn't respond.
I meant to do that. Okay. Washing my brush off, gonna switch down to the little brush here. And you might need to mix more color. I am trying to be lazy and not do it, but now I'm gonna mix some more color. I was extending the life of it with water. There. Pretty close. Okay, so we've got our base of our tree trunks built. You can use this little brush and clean up any weirdness that might be down here. And now we can just go crazy with branches. So I will add water to this because it does make it easier to draw with if you have a little water mixed in your paint. I'm not pushing very hard. I'm very lightly, just barely touching the tip of the bristles to the canvas, because that's going to give you the smallest, most delicate branches. But if you end up with a few crazy thick, ugly branches, a well-placed batch of tree foliage will cover that. So you're not really locked into much of anything here. Occasionally make some bendy branches. They look really good showing at the bottom of the tree. So you see how I have quite a few of those. Like I'll do one right here. If you're not comfortable doing that though, and you want to just do a more of a typical tree like we've been painting, that's not going to be wrong at all. You can build your painting the way you like it, what feels comfortable to you. Maybe you're not ready for something this bendy yet. You'll get there.
I feel like I'm going to lose most of my background.
Did you make a big tree?
I did.
Yeah, you did. Yeah,
right.
So you can build your tree as tall as you want.
I'll just do less foliage on mine.
I'm just adding twigs, so I'll add branches and then I add little twigs off of some of those. Just in case some of this shows and then it Gives it a little bit more realistic quality. You can do like a little broken branch, maybe like there. Okay, nice dead looking tree. It'll be good for foliage. And then I'll get some branches on this one. Same thing if you want to do some bendy. Always dip down and back up because they're going to try to grow towards the light source. Always competing with each other. Just like my 2 dogs at home.
It's true.
Your branches don't have to be perfect.
Now you tell me.
Again, I'm going to reiterate, well-placed foliage will cover any imperfections. We call it the painter's Band-Aid. Let's dry that. I mean, wash and dry the brush. Okay, so we are going to now mix. I'm deciding if I want to use my big brush or I think we can start with our big brush. So we're going to make burgundy. I'll show it to you on here. So I have fire red on top, just plain fire red. So that's what, you see how you have I have these dark patches in here that give the tree more of a 3-dimensional feel. That's what we're doing now, just the dark patches. We're gonna paint the dark elements and then we'll bring in the lighter elements afterwards. So I'm going to make burgundy by mixing red and black. Wherever you've got room. The black will overpower pretty quickly. So start with maybe 2 parts red, 1 part black. See where you need to go from there. Here we go. Nice Merlot color. And I'm going to use the corner of my brush so I can control the dabs a little better. I think we used this big brush when we did this tree back here. Same exact thing. And it's really common to want to follow each branch until you, here I'll do what we don't want to do. So it's really common to want to do that. And there are some plants that grow like that, but not this tree. So what we're doing is we have, trees have when we paint the trees, they have a lot of little twigs and things that we just can't see. Otherwise we'd have to paint so many of them. So what I do is I float foliage all around to make it big and poofy. And I just think about the fact that, you know, there's a ton of extra branches and twigs that are in here that we can't see. And so it's going to make this tree big and puffy with a lot of foliage. So you're ending up dabbing over most of your branches, which I don't know, maybe that's a good thing. Depends on how much you liked your branches. But I do like this lower area where they show. And I can go back and paint more in there after I get the tree put on there if I feel like, you know, it's lacking some.
Sassy Kitty says, I love fall paintings. I'm so excited for the September box. And
yay!
We do too, and we found in the studio that we could run fall paintings all year long.
We definitely can.
And they do well, and it's really the only seasonal paintings that I feel like we can do all year long.
Yeah, definitely. I love them too. So I see on camera, this probably looks pretty black, but it's actually burgundy. It's like the color of Cabernet or Merlot. And that's about how much of this color I want to put on. I could put more, it wouldn't be wrong. What I don't want is I don't want too much less than that. So having a good bit of that color in there is gonna be very helpful for what we do. So let's do this one now. Sometimes I start by just putting the puffs on the top branches and then just rounding everything out from there. Using the corner of my brush. So we're getting a lot of paint on here at a time, but by using the corner of the brush, you have some level of control. And you can build your tree out bigger than your branches go. So if you have branches that end like right in here, you can build it out further. Nobody has to know that there's no branches under there. You're just faking people out here.
Nobody's got to know about
Nobody gotta know about it.
That could be our milk.
Yeah, so you can see we ended up covering our poor little shrub across the river. Totally fine.
It's kind of like the extra whose scene just got cut.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a great analogy to use. We actually say that a lot in the painting class, that the background elements are like the extras in a movie. They're not the most important thing. You probably don't really even notice them, but it would be weird without them. So let's wash the brush when you're ready. Take your time. How are we looking time-wise? So we've been painting an hour. That's great.
Yeah, not even quite.
Great. Yeah, so these are going to dry for a little bit of time before we add the bright fire red on top. And what you can do in the meantime, you can finish up painting this base foliage in. But the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to brighten this one back here up a little bit. It could stay like it is and be totally fine. But on the original, I did add a little bit brighter foliage in there. So I just mixed a, this is a real pastel coral, so it has a lot of white in it. So I mixed one that wasn't quite as pastel. So that was brush whites, number 4. I'm going to use my second smallest. Yellow, red, and I'm just going to use less white this time. And a lot of you guys are just now getting your September boxes. They shipped on Friday, but we had the Labor Day holiday in there. Just thought about that, but they just went out. So I'm going to take and just use the corner of this brush, dab some of this on, and then I'll play around. I'll see, you know, that's really close to the same color, so maybe I'll add a bit more red in here. Do some little tappies of this color. You could add yellow. Oh, that looks nice. I just dipped my brush right in yellow and just kind of spread it around on my palette. And so I have yellow and coral back here. Nice looking combo. And if you need to, you can, if you feel like you need to, you can reflect a little in the water, but be very careful. I have too much paint on there. Because we don't need a lot in the water. If you left this reflection of these additional colors off, it probably would go unnoticed. As I'm adding it. Okay. So yeah, I just sort of made that one a little more noticeable. It's the more noticeable extra. It's the extra with the lines.
It's the extra staring right at the camera.
I gotta see what colors I used for the ground around the tree. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to highlight the tree trunks and a little bit of the ground around the base of the tree trunks. I'll show you here. Gosh, it's hard to see it. There we go. Raising it up so you can kind of see the yellow highlight that goes along here and a bit on the ground. It's subtle, extremely subtle. You know, I'm going to use, you can use your medium brush, either your number 8 or number 4, whichever one you feel the most comfortable with. My number 8 has gotten a little bit flared out just from use, lots of use. So I'm going to use the thin edge of this number 4, yellow paint, and I'm going to go up the left side of this tree trunk and kind of into the branches a little. My brush strokes are a little scratchy vertical, or they curve with the tree brush strokes, because you can make it start to mimic bark. Seems like our lighting is really dark tonight. I think it's because it's getting dark outside sooner. And then let's just highlight the ground a bit. So think of it like the sun is just glancing off of this little landform here right at the edge. You can paint it back a little. Now one thing that's kind of fun, so this tree trunk would definitely cast a bit of a shadow. So I'll highlight the both sides of the tree trunk, but behind it, leave it pretty dark. So you're sort of painting a shadow by painting the lightness around it. Here we go. Let's do the other side too. Again, super subtle part of the painting, but important. Okay. Wash that brush off. Before I add the fire red to the trees, which is, they're still drying a bit, I did add, so we've got all this green foliage back here. I added some plain unmixed yellow to some of the foliage just because it made it stand out just a bit more without taking the attention away from the big red trees. And it also allows these to dry just a little bit longer, so we're sort of buying time too. I'm going to use my number 8 brush and just solid yellow, just your deep yellow there, and just pick some areas that you want to add some bright yellow. So maybe there's a certain variety of tree back here that changes to all yellow leaves. We have a whole street of those here in Sherwood that everybody takes their senior pictures for high school there along that street, and photographers come in just to take pictures of the streets. They are lit up like light bulbs. It's so bright and so beautiful. I'll try to take a picture of it and maybe put it on our Instagram or something. Our Instagram is just @GoBox. I'm working on doing more posts every week, so I can get kind of sidetracked and forget that, oh yeah, I need to manage social media too. So there, I added yellow. I love the look of that. Washing the brush now, and we are gonna fire red out these trees. I want to see if I added anything else.
Looks like there's some lighter highlights on those trees too.
That's what I thought too.
I mean, on the foreground trees.
Huh.
That was a convincing huh.
Just looking.
That was really confidence inspiring.
Yeah, so I did, the instructions say just add fire red, but I think I probably had some fun with some yellow and coral in there too, just for fun. You can play around with it. But to make these trees turn from dark burgundy to something that's really bright and colorful, we're going to take our number 8 brush, same one we were just using back here. And it's probably the reason it's sort of flared out, because I use this one the most often, I think. And I'm going to dip it just right in the fire red and just start dabbing that on here. Now, we were using a smaller brush than we did before, because remember we created all this with the big brush. So you'll have more control. And you can paint little patches of red and then move along and paint another patch of red so that you end up with having dark areas too. So you don't want to cover all of your dark. You want to cover, I would say about, 75% of it maybe. Unless you like it with less. That's the nice thing, you get to choose. But having the dark patches in there will give you a sense of depth. Like this tree is not just all one dimension. We've got deeper parts and deeper pockets. So if you think about it, your sunlight would be really highlighting this fire red here. So you can concentrate most of your red along here if you want, and less over here, so it gives you more of a directional light look to the light source. So if you are painting little patches of red dabs like I talked about, we got another thing to think about here. Sorry, make your brain hurt a little. What is super common is to make a pattern so you look and like you've got like a little circular patch every ½ inch apart. I do it all the time. I think our human brain loves patterns, so we tend to do that. So if you have that going on, just break up some of those by coming in and making some of those patches a little bit bigger and bolder and brighter. Your red leaves can go beyond where your burgundy reaches, so you don't have to stick them to burgundy. You can have some that go up here and higher, build the tree out a bit.
It's really quiet.
There's a lot of deciduous tree painting tutorials online, and I will watch them too because I feel like there's always new methods to learn. And I think I don't like getting locked into one method all the time. I like being able to experiment with different methods and try them out. So I highly recommend you just on YouTube look up deciduous tree painting tutorial. There was one I watched recently. It was a very summery scene with a big green tree in a field. And I remember the guy painted most of it outdoors on site, but then he had to paint the rest of it in his studio. And I just loved watching that one come together. There's a lot of really good artists out there. Okay, so I probably got more dark patches than I need. So I'll dab on some extra red here and there. And then I'm going to work on this one. Try not to think about it too much. I know I gave you a lot to think about, which can be overwhelming, but
That's usually my job. Giving people too much to think about when they're painting.
Some of our paintings are easy, and then others definitely take a bit more thought. Landscapes can be tough.
What are you trying to say?
Your paintings are tough, Paul. Scoot this over.
But you don't get better by not pushing yourself.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, I've seen a lot of people just kind of get content with where they're at.
Oh, I definitely have done that.
And that goes for anything, any skill you're going after.
Yeah. These are maybe, there's a place here in Oregon in Portland called Japanese Garden. It's absolutely beautiful. And especially in, well, summer, fall. I don't think I've ever been up there in the winter. But most of the other seasons I've been up there, and it just reminds me of this. This painting reminds me of the Japanese gardens. And
Totally.
they have this koi pond that has these old koi. They're like super old. I can't believe how long koi live. It's just so pretty. I would love to just set up and paint there. Maybe they'd let us do a YouTube video there. I don't know. So you do end up covering like 95% of the branches that you might have stressed out about earlier. Like I said, like I keep saying, it's really good practice to paint the branches and kind of build the blueprint of the tree and then add to it with the foliage. And then I just continue looking at the tree and seeing if I need to, are there any parts I need to shape out a little better? Is this a sculpted tree that someone came through and keeps shaped out like a bonsai tree? Probably. Kind of has that look. All right, I'm gonna wash my brush, and I will show you how to add some yellow and coral in here. It's extra. Oh, you know what? Actually, don't follow what I'm doing. We need to add some little falling leaves. Well, we don't need to. It's something I added last, and I thought I was done, and I thought it would be nice to add some actual fall foliage coming down under the trees. So if you want to do that, I would recommend using your littler brush that came in your kit, your little flat brush, number 4. You'll get smaller leaves that way. Experiment with just using the corner of it and doing a little swipe. And make sure you pile some on the ground or on the bottom of the tree. Some can land on the water. Some can blow off and up above the tree. Maybe there's a little gust of wind. Yeah, somebody's coming through and trimming these trees and raking the leaves up. We are almost done. Like, it could be done now. You could sign it now. But we're going to add, well, I'm going to add a little bit more color to my leaves on the red trees. So the colors I would add would be like yellow is a no-brainer. Add some yellow in there. It'll mix with your wet red paint so you get orange, which is nice. And it's nice to actually put this on where the sun is going to glance off of. So this left side here is perfect for that. Just let that sunlight light up a few of these. Doesn't have to be very many. You could even do some over here, like maybe this is a branch that sticks out more. So those leaves are gonna get a little sun kiss. And then over here, just under the sunlight there. The other color you can use throughout your tree, I wouldn't use much of it, but you could use the coral color. So that was red, yellow, and white. I actually am not going to put that on because I think I like the way it's looking now without a ton of extra light leaves going on in here. So I could, if I wanted to, I could come in and add more branches coming up to the bottom of the leaf base. But I think it's actually okay. I am gonna add another little spot of yellow on the highlighted areas on the trunk because as it dried, it got kind of transparent. I like that to show up a bit. How are you looking over there, Paul? You just about done?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I kind of got a little carried away with my trees, so they ended up taking over, so I'm trying to make sure that they are really the focal point. So I'm going to go ahead and sign mine and call it done.
I'm going to sign mine too, and I like to use the small brush, and you know, I'm going to use the kind of the coral color. I've got a bit right here, and it's a nice color to use for signing. When you are signing your painting, I like to use the little brush, of course, because you're writing. Light touch, but also it's helpful to add a drop or two of water into your color. And pull and twist your brush like this so that you knock off any excess globs of paint. You can even like pinch the tip of the bristles and then re-dip them in. And then just give it a little signature or whatever you end up doing. And there we go. Autumn sunrise.
There it is.
Yeah, let's have a look at it with the original. And then we'll show Paul's.
My monstrosity.
And then we'll show our Halloween paintings or October paintings. Yeah, so actually it's strange that my trees on the new one ended up being a tiny bit smaller. Usually when I'm teaching I accidentally go bigger. Definitely a bit softer through here with the brush. I probably used the bigger brush quite a bit and built up a nice big base. But I like them both. So here we go. Let's have a look at Paul's. Oh yeah, I didn't really get to take much of a look at what you were doing over there. Yours definitely have this really neat linear thing happening with your foliage that gives it more of a bonsai look. True to the bonsai. And I like this. You added some rocky stuff.
Well, I actually
See, when I design landscapes, I need to borrow your brain a little bit here and there.
I accidentally connected my bits of land and then came back in and put that in to separate them.
Yeah. So. And then he also added a little bit of the red in the top of the sky, like I mentioned early on. If you like this look, it definitely gives it more of a natural look. So you can go through and you could add some little humps of land. Just make sure that they're flat on the bottom, because that's how it would be where the water comes up and meets it.
I want to point out one other thing that I did that is really subtle, but I think I really like how it turned out. And that's, I put little hints of lots of trunks.
Oh yeah, I noticed that.
In the fog, and then I brought those little hints down into the water a little bit too.
Very nice. Yeah, you have a lot of fog going in there, which is cool.
I completely lost that background landmass though. It's like, feels very unresolved because it's just like this little stripe coming out and...
Yeah.
I
was just reading... The rhododendron gardens near Reed College, yes, definitely. Yeah. There's a Reed College here in Portland. Yeah, beautiful campus.
So here we are. We're 1 minute and 16 seconds in. Let's
show Halloween painting.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's start with yours.
Okay.
Yours is definitely more Halloween.
This is really out of not straight. So this is mine. I usually will do something whimsical for holidays. That's my favorite way to paint. And yeah, so I think this one, what did we call it? The Watcher? It's called The Watcher. We've got a little, I don't know if this is a haunted house or not. I think I meant for it to be haunted, but it actually looks like a cozy little house. You might want to go have a cup of tea up.
I think it looks pretty haunted to me.
And then Paul's, we've got mushrooms, which this has a very 1970s vibe to it, which I think is cool.
I had a lot of fun doing that one because Jenny said, don't paint a landscape this month. And then she said...
I gave him a challenge.
And then she said, paint mushrooms. And then she gave me like 2 colors.
I really like this color palette too, and Paul had added the blue, so I'm going to teach us how to... because I wasn't planning on sending blue, and he really needed it. And I did my painting weeks ahead of his, and so when I teach this, I'll show us how to add some blue elements to this that maybe reflected on the crow would be super cool.
The blue would be a great highlight on the crow.
So there we go.
And on the windows maybe of the house.
Oh yeah.
So not a lot of blue used, but it definitely, the painting, it helps to add a little, for the one I was doing in particular.
Yeah.
So, we zip back.
Yep, we'll zip back.
I'm going to try to not look like I'm just lounging with my belly. Here we are.
So thanks for joining us today. We had a lot of fun going through that one. Landscapes are fun. They're not my favorite thing to paint, but it's like with you guys, I'm learning as I go.
On the flip side, they are my favorite thing to paint.
Yeah, they're Paul's favorite thing to paint. So I usually let him do most of the landscapes. But if you're just stumbling on us, we're a subscription box, and we come out monthly with 2 unique projects a month. And if we're coming up near holidays, we'll usually theme it somewhere around there, like slightly. Usually, like at Christmas time, we'll do just snowy paintings with snowmen and things like that.
No, we were talking yesterday about the potential of doing a couple spooky paintings that would be outside the subscription box, but available in October. So if you guys would like to see that and you've got some ideas, drop a comment in down below, or shoot us an email on the website or chat message.
Give us some suggestions.
Yeah, because I think we both like kind of doing spooky stuff, but we don't necessarily want to force you guys to have to do spooky stuff with the subscription box. So
not everybody loves spooky.
Not everybody loves spooky.
So this one, it's kind of whimsical spooky.
That's about as spooky as we're gonna get in with the subscription box. Yeah. So let us know, drop us a message, hit subscribe.
Yeah, and we'll see you next week. Probably same day, same time.
Yeah.
For Paul's Red Sunset, and we'll be painting that 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. next Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Probably.
Tuesday.
We'll put it out in our newsletter.
All right.
So you go on to gobox.com and sign up for our newsletter. You'll get all the
Sign
updates.
up for it. Do it.
All right. We'll see you guys later.
Do it. Sign up.
Bye.